Cold War. In this video we will dive into the origins of one of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century, the Cold War. We'll look at why and how this long-running confrontation between the two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States of America, began and shaped world politics for decades to come. After the end of World War II in 1945, the world did not return to peaceful life. On the contrary, the planet found itself on the threshold of a new, invisible but extremely dangerous confrontation. The Cold War was a period of deep, ideological, political, and military rivalry between the Communist East, represented by the Soviet Union, and the capitalist West, led by the United States. Ideological differences formed the basis of the conflict. Communism versus capitalism. These two systems represented radically different approaches to the organization of society and the economy, to the distribution of power and resources. Iron Curtain. On March 5, 1946, Winston Churchill, former British Prime Minister, delivered a speech at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, USA. This speech was intended to warn the world about the growing influence of the Soviet Union and communist ideology. Churchill first used the term Iron Curtain to describe the line separating Soviet-controlled territories in Eastern Europe from Western Europe, which was under the influence of Western democracies. He emphasized that behind this curtain, countries were under Soviet domination, which threatened the freedom and security of the entire world. In his speech, Churchill called for a fraternal alliance of Anglo-Saxon nations to counter the spread of communism, and he also supported the creation of the United Nations to ensure peace and security on a global level. The Fulton speech caused a wide resonance and controversy. On the one hand, it was welcomed in Western countries, which saw it as a realistic assessment of the threat from the Soviet Union. On the other hand, the USSR viewed it as a provocation and an indictment of Soviet policy, which only exacerbated tensions between the two superpowers. Arms race. The arms race began at the end of World War II, when the United States used nuclear weapons for the first time against Japan in 1945. This event demonstrated the enormous destructive power of the new weaponry and provoked a response from the Soviet Union, which accelerated its own nuclear weapons development program. In 1949, the USSR successfully conducted its first atomic bomb test, ushering in the nuclear era in the armed forces of both countries. The following decades were characterized by intensive development and accumulation of nuclear arsenal by both powers. The race covered the development of not only atomic but also thermonuclear hydrogen bombs, which had an even more powerful destructive potential. A key moment was the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles (ICBMs) capable of delivering nuclear warheads over vast distances in minutes. An important part of the arms race was the development of ballistic missile defense (BMD) and multi-headed warhead MIRV systems, which further exacerbated tensions and raised the stakes of the confrontation. Strategic bombers, submarines with ballistic missiles on board, and mobile missile systems became an integral part of both countries' nuclear arsenals. After the first years of tension, which were characterized by an arms race and ideological confrontation, the world entered a thaw. However, this did not mean the end of confrontation. The USSR and the United States were looking for ways to expand their influence beyond their borders, involving Europe, Asia and Latin America in their sphere of interest. Race in space. On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union made a historic breakthrough by sending Yuri Gagarin into space on the Vostok 1 spacecraft. This flight was the greatest achievement in human history and proof of the USSR's technological superiority in the field of astronautics at the time. Gagarin made one revolution around the Earth, flying in space for about 108 minutes, after which he returned safely to Earth. Gagarin's launch into space was of great importance, not only for science and technology, but also for Cold War politics. The event came to symbolize an ideological victory for the Soviet Union, emphasizing its leadership in the space race and sparking a wave of national pride among Soviet citizens. Reactions around the world were mixed. While many marveled at the achievement, in the United States it raised concerns about America's lagging behind in the space race, and raised the stakes in the competition for space supremacy. Following Gagarin's success, the USSR and the United States continued their space exploration efforts, leading to many significant achievements, including the first human spacewalk, the American landing on the moon, and the development of many important technologies that are still in use today. Cuban Crisis. The crisis began in October 1962, when U.S. intelligence discovered Soviet missile installations in Cuba. U.S. President John F. Kennedy responded by announcing a naval blockade of the island. To prevent the delivery of more missiles, the world was on the brink of nuclear war as both sides embarked on a course of confrontation. The situation escalated to the extreme when Soviet ships carrying missile weapons approached the blockade line. However, at the last moment, they changed course to avoid direct confrontation. Top-level negotiations between the US and the USSR led to a resolution of the crisis. The Soviet Union agreed to dismantle and remove the missiles from Cuba in exchange for a promise by the United States not to invade Cuba. In addition, a secret agreement was reached to remove US medium-range missiles from Turkey, which also posed a threat to the USSR. The Cuban crisis demonstrated the danger of nuclear war and the need for dialogue between the nuclear powers. It led to the establishment of a direct telephone line of communication between Washington and Moscow, known as the Hotline, to avoid similar crises in the future. The fall of the Berlin Wall. The 1970s was a time of détente and détente between the USSR and the United States. Despite the ongoing ideological confrontation, both sides came to understand the need to reduce military tension and prevent nuclear threats. This was reflected in the signing of a number of arms control treaties, including SALT I and SALT II, which limited the number of strategic weapons. One of the key events symbolizing the end of the Cold War was the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. This moment not only united East and West Germany, but also symbolized the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe. The formal end of the Cold War came in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. This event put an end to the global confrontation between two ideologies and opened a new era in world history, characterized by increased globalization, the expansion of democracy and significant changes in international relations. US loss to the USSR. This idea seems unexpected, but offers a different perspective on historical events. First, the ideological influence of the USSR continues to live in the hearts of many people, emphasizing the importance of ideas of social justice. Second, the end of the confrontation led to a slowdown in innovation in the US, showing that competition contributed to progress. Finally, many aspects of Soviet policy were internationally recognized as a moral victory over the United States. This view emphasizes that the question of the victor in the Cold War remains open, reminding us of the importance of the lessons of history for achieving peace in the present. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the past.